Everyone, Jeff Silverman with My City Videos. Thank you for joining us again. If you're joining us for the first time, My City Videos is an online video magazine all about Corvallis. Great people, events, nonprofits who are doing great work in the beautiful city of Corvallis. Today, we have the opportunity to be live on campus here at Oregon State University at the KBVR studios. Thank them very much for having us on. And my guest for a second time is Chris Nordyke. And Chris is a local business consultant. Chris, welcome back.
Thanks for having me, Jeff.
All right.
Yeah, it's fun.
Last time we spoke, Chris and I discussed marketing, advertising, the changing landscape of marketing with social media, what best practices that businesses can have when trying to gain market share or new customers, right? And today we want to talk a little bit more about that and introduce perhaps some values. So as a company, what do I value and why that matters to my customer? So perhaps, Chris, we could jump right into that of how do I establish what I value? And you said there's some core values and then there's some other types of values, so share that with us.
Well, so we're still kind of talking about this theme of marketing and how things have changed. And just so people don't think this is kind of a kumbaya moment where this is all sort of touchy-feely, the research has shown that a 5% increase, this is Bain & Company, a huge consulting firm in the U.S., said that a 5% increase in customer retention can increase profits by as much as 125%. That's a pretty amazing number, and it points to the importance of customer experience and how something that we've always known, which is it's far cheaper to keep a customer than it is to gain a new one, right? So that's what this is all about. Values are really at the start of the whole marketing conversation, and values essentially drive every aspect of customer experience. So what do I mean by values? Everybody says they have values. So I've never worked with a client that said, oh, I have no idea what my values are. A lot of people default to the common ones like integrity, honesty, quality, without giving real thought to what that means for their business and what kind of expectation that sets. Okay, so let me define values a little bit. Patrick Lencioni, in his book, The Advantage, talks a lot about this. Amazing book. Does a great job of differentiating between the two. So core values are those things that are already inherently true about you and or your business. So as a business owner, particularly a small business, you essentially are the business, right? What are those things that are true now about you? Not what do you want to become or not what do you want to have true about your business, but what's true now? What's inherent to your company and your own personal values.
Okay, so you said that's core values. So what do I already naturally, authentically bring to the business world?
Right.
Okay.
Right, so those things like honesty and integrity, Lencioni would describe those as permission to play values, right? If you're not honest, people shouldn't be doing business with you. If you don't have integrity, right, people shouldn't be doing business with you, right? So that's just like par for the course. But a lot of times people confuse that and they slap those values under their mission statement and they tell them to their employees, but they really don't mean anything in terms of how their business functions, okay? Aspirational values are those things that you may not currently possess, they aren't natural, they aren't instinctive to you or your business, but you recognize them as important. So for example, one of my clients who's in professional services, relational was one of their values, right? We value relationships, we build into relationships. But one of the things they realize is they're not inherently organized or accurate. That's an aspirational value for that business. It's not core to them, but they recognize it's important, so they pursue that through the people they hire, the service vendors that they bring on to help them with certain aspects of their business, et cetera. So why this is important is that your values should matter and impact every area of your business. It should impact the experience customers have. It should impact your advertising. Because what you're trying to create as a business is this seamless experience when a customer is first introduced to your brand externally on Facebook, via a Yelp post, via a coffee chat with a friend, on through to their experiences with your salespeople, your store manager, and then afterwards when they're experiencing your customer service after they've already bought a product or service. You want that to be seamless versus disjointed and incongruent, right? The worst thing that can happen is to create a really awesome looking website or a really impressive newspaper ad and then have the actual experience a customer has not be quite so swell, right? So thinking through what are my values, what am I inherently offering and going to deliver to my customer, then creating ads, then creating external marketing that displays that.
Sure. So give us some examples of perhaps some small companies doing a good job in this area, and then maybe some bigger companies doing a good job. I mean, I think of the Bud Light, Super Bowl commercials that are so disjointed. Yeah. I mean, what does a horse running with a dog have to do with drinking cold beer? Yeah. And I know they're looking just for that feel good. We're a company that believes in family values. So,
sure.
But as a company, they're all over the place, in my opinion,
Yeah.
But give us some other examples of some companies that you think are doing a good job of delivering on their advertised values.
Well, so a lot of people have heard about Zappos by now. So Zappos is now owned by Amazon. I actually first got acquainted with Zappos almost 5 years ago. Back when they were a relatively small company, Zappos started in a garage selling shoes on the internet, and now of course they sell almost everything. But what's interesting about Zappos is one of their core values that they established at the very, very beginning is that they're a service company that happens to sell, at the time, shoes. Now they say pretty much everything. But they're a service company, not a retailer. So they see themselves as a company that offers service as their core offering.
And they're a drop ship company, do you know? I mean,
they've got warehouses all over the U.S. now. But what's interesting about that is how that plays out in their day-to-day operations and with their call center people and management and so forth. So I actually had a chance to visit Zappos. And when we were getting a tour, one of the things they talked about is how there's no restriction on how long they're on the line with a customer. And anybody who's been around call centers, they know the primary goal is to get the shortest call time possible because the more calls they can take or make, the more money they make. Well, Zappos just completely turned that on its head. And they said, hey, your goal is to provide the best experience for the customer, no matter how long that takes. And the person who's giving the tour shared about this time where a customer called in and the call center rep was on the phone for 8 hours, their entire shift. And they didn't get disciplined. They didn't get critiqued on that. It was part of their core values. And so they just account for the fact there's going to be some of those outlier experiences where, hey, we have to be true to our values. It's going to cost a little money in this one, occasionally. But over the long haul, it's going to be, we're going to win by staying true to those values. One other really quick example, I called in to buy a pair of shoes from Zappos. I couldn't find the size I needed online. I had a job interview. This was 5-6 years ago. And I thought, well, I'll check and see if maybe it's in inventory. It's just not showing up. And the gal that I was talking to said, hey, let me check. 2 minutes later, she got back to me and she said, you know what, I'm sorry, we don't have it in stock, but I found that exact pair of shoes in your size on endless.com, which is a competitor. Wow. And turns out they have free shipping also. If you'll give me your email address, I'll send you the link so you can purchase those tonight. Wow. I was blown away, right? I mean, that's true to that service value. And that made a huge impact. So I've bought a lot of stuff on Zappos, and so has my wife since then.
Right. And companies make it easy. Companies like that make it easy to do business with them, right? Yeah. For instance, Amazon has its one-click, we know your address, we know your billing information, you're one click away from making this purchase. They make it really easy. Right. How can smaller businesses, maybe local retail, make it easier to do business with them?
Yeah, well, I think it comes back to the Zappos example, right? That didn't cost money necessarily. It just cost time. And retail businesses, they have time. And so it's implementing those, potentially service is the value that they really need to embrace. And it may look very similar to Zappos in that, hey, we never turn people away. We never say, oh, I'm sorry, we don't stock that. We don't let somebody walk out the door without helping them. So a great example of that is if I'm a shoe store in Corvallis, or I'm a health food store and somebody comes in looking for something, we don't have it, instead of sending them on their way, I'm going to say, hold on just a second. Let me see if I can find you either some other place locally or someplace online that has exactly the same thing you're looking for. It's just a matter of service commitment, right? It's an earnestness of, I'm going to do whatever I can. And it's surprising how far that goes with most customers. A lot of customers describe earnestness as one of the things that is most impressive, right? That desire to serve. And local businesses can do that just as well as Zappos can.
So that comes back to the core values. Let's say a local retail store, they had a dream of having a small shoe store in downtown Corvallis, but they are not a people person, right?
Yeah.
That was not in their business plan. They just wanted to sell great shoes, let's say, from designers they loved.
Yeah.
Now, to deliver on that thing that it's not part of their core values, they need to hire somebody who's a great service person, right?
Absolutely.
So what are some other ways that companies are doing that? They're making up for their failings or their shortcomings.
Well, I mean you're right. They have to surround themselves with people that do embrace those values and really identify them as aspirational values, because one of the worst things a business can do is to say they're something they're not. So it's really, really important for business owners, if they are not service-oriented, if that's not a core value of theirs, to identify that honestly and to communicate that to their team and the people they bring around them. Hey, listen, this is not a core value of mine, but I recognize it's an aspirational value. It's really become par for the course that we provide this amazing service experience, which is why you're such a critical part of the team. And that really speaks to this concept of building a lighthouse inside your business. What I mean by that is, once you've nailed down your core values, it's really important for the business owner in every single interaction they have with their team and their customers to be reinforcing those values and tying those values back to current situations. So, for example, when they're hiring, to reflect on those values in the interview process so the candidates know exactly what they're getting into, what's expected of them, and what that business owner is looking for. So your example of the non-service oriented retailer, that should be a huge part of their interview process, because their success of their business will depend on them having a team that really excels, really embraces that service component. But if the business owner tries to position somehow that they care about service and that's a big core value of theirs, and it's really not, it's going to create a lot of tension, confusion inside the business. So it's really key that they just acknowledge, hey, this isn't my gift. I'm hiring you because it's such a critical part of our business.
Yeah. So let's talk about service industries, perhaps, who promise something. Comcast says we'll be there between 2 and 4. To be at your house. That's not acceptable to a lot.
I've never had that happen.
Yeah. So how can service companies take advantage of promises to their customers and delivering those promises?
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about service industries.
Yeah. Well, one of the things, so you bring a great example is Comcast, and we could probably rattle off a dozen, examples from that
hey, we're the
company.
biggest guy in town, and we get to tell you when we're coming.
Well, it's a classic case study of huge companies taking their customer relationships for granted. But one of the first examples that comes to my mind is banks. And I think one of the things that banks and other financial services can do is to think really carefully about their customers' time and respecting their customers' time. All of us can think of examples where either we needed to, we got offered a credit card to set up, or, hey, if, let us take a look at your checking account. We have this new package, right? You're in the bank to go make a deposit or make a withdrawal, and the personal banker says, oh, hey, let me share with you about this. Do you have an extra 5 minutes? And then 30 minutes later, we finally walk out. And how do we feel about that company, right? We feel like they've wasted our time, they've taken advantage of our time, haven't respected our time. And so one of the things that companies can look at is hey, are we setting proper expectations for people? Kind of the old way of doing things is to the bait and switch, lure people in. Hey, in just 15 minutes you could save, right? Those kind of messages. And what customers are finding is that's usually not true, right? There's fine print. And then we feel betrayed, and then we feel like we can't trust that brand. And so I wrote about on my blog that process of setting up a bank account, how that bank can set a proper expectation. Hey, this is going to take probably 25 minutes. Do you have that time right now, or should we schedule a follow-up time that's better for you? Just those simple 2 or 3 sentences can really, really impact that customer's perception of your business.
Yeah. But Gary Vaynerchuk said that a good indicator of the things people value is on their homepage of their smartphone.
Right.
Any thoughts on that? I mean, these are the things that I value as a customer. Absolutely. How can a business tap into this here, you know?
It's great marketing survey data, right? When you're around your target customers, whether they're friends or family, but they're kind of in your target demographic, look at their home screen, because it tells you how they're spending their time, right? What companies they have an affinity for, right? Do they have a Chase mobile app on their thing, or a Zappos app, right? It gives you a lot of insight into what people care about. Considering we all spend probably half our day or plus on our cell phones, that's great data.
So how does that help a local business who knows that their customers are also on their smartphone most of the day?
Yeah.
How do they tap in with smaller budgets, right? Of course, they maybe can't design an app and have it promoted on the front page of iTunes. What can they do to, do they ask every customer who comes in the store, hey, can we put you on our mailing list? Can we send you occasional texts of sales? Or can you be on our VIP list where you'll be the first to know? What are some good practices to get on our homepage?
Yeah. Well, so there's a lot of ways, inexpensive ways for small businesses to create their own apps. So there are ways to actually do that, to create simple interfaces to stream promotions and announcements and events for your business straight to somebody's handset. So it gives them a really simple way just to download your app and use that to stay in touch. The key thing, though, again, it comes back to values. What kind of relationship are you trying to have with your customer? And Gary Vaynerchuk said, we talked about this a little bit the last segment, really important to establish a relationship where you give first multiple times before you make the ask. It's like a lot of marriage advice. I heard, I don't know if it's Gary Smalley or another marriage author, he talks about the importance of making regular deposits into that love account. Well, the same exact thing is true of relationships with your customers and your prospects. Is there has to be trust established first. Because there's so much noise now, people inherently distrust initially. There's an assumption that you're untrustworthy until you make the effort, energy, and investment to actually establish that trust. And so the question of how does a business owner take advantage of that? Well, I think a great way to start is to ask customers, hey, what's a good way for us to connect with you? How would you feel about getting a text message from us? Because the reality is you'll probably get different answers from different customers. But the most important thing is building trust, having their permission, never spam. That kind of goes without saying, I think, with most business owners now, but I still see people making that mistake, and it breaks trust. It absolutely harms their reputation as a brand, even if nobody complains. And it feels like that's kind of the pulse point a lot of business owners are waiting for, because that's kind of the old school thing. If you take complaint calls, well, maybe then we have a problem. But the reality is people are so bombarded with experiences that there's a good chance nobody will ever complain to you. They'll just complain to their friends. So again, it's relationship, and it's starting by asking, how can we best connect with you? Do you want an app? Do you want us texting you?
Gotcha. Chris, tell us a little bit about your process when you're working with a new client. And what are some of the initial things you're doing with them, and then what in your consulting practice are you doing to help them down the road?
Yeah. So one of the most important things I do with customers is help them establish what their customer lifetime value is, or CLV. And the reason for that is it puts their budget in proper perspective. So when we talk about customer experience, there's all kinds of nice, wild and crazy things you can do. Like with Zappos has been known to send bouquets of flowers unexpectedly. If in conversation somebody mentions, my mom just died or there's something bad that happened. Well, you can only do that in a smart way if you understand the value of that customer. So, for example, when I was in the insurance business, I knew based on my financials that a single insurance policy was worth about $50 in commission for me every year that I had that customer. So if I had a household with 4 or 5 policies, I knew on average it was worth about $200 a year for me. And I could look through my records and see on average how long I keep a customer. And let's just say that's 5 years. Well, I know one client household is worth about $1,000. Well, that can really help me determine what can I afford to steward that relationship? What kinds of things can I do for them while still being profitable? And so that's the first thing a business needs to do after they've established what their values are and they've gotten clear on that is, what's my customer worth? And I think most businesses don't have any idea. They could tell you their cash flow, they could show you their balance sheet and their profit and loss statement, but they don't have a clear sense of what is every single new customer that walks through my door worth? Therefore, what can I spend to acquire them? And what can I spend to keep them? And so that's a really critical piece of what I do, because once you have that, then the creativity can start to flow. Then the testing can start to happen of, hey, let's try this initiative for a period of time, compare it with that initiative, and see what's having the greatest effect on retention, referral growth, et cetera. The other thing, too, I do is help a company along with those values is establish a lighthouse, which is what I was talking about, which is really, it's all about leadership behaviors. So it's coaching those general managers, CEOs, business owners, how to continually be communicating and reinforcing those values with their team. Because the goal is, as a business owner, that you don't have to be at your business for it to be functioning well and growing. And so this idea of building a lighthouse is just like with ships. The lighthouse doesn't move. It's always there. It's always a source of direction. Likewise, in your business, if you do a great job of developing those values and setting them up correctly, even when stuff comes up, customer situations, employee situations, people can reflect back on that lighthouse, the way that you've explained the values and reinforced them, and they can say, okay, there's not a specific policy for this situation, but based on our values, I think my best choice here is X, right? So there's less confusion in the business, and it functions well without that owner or that business leader being there, which is what every CEO, general manager, branch manager, director wants to build. But there's a very specific process to that. All starts with values, and then there's new behaviors that people have to learn to really evangelize those values amongst their team.
Sure. Well, I was going to say the lighthouse sitting on that shore line directing in the online world is changing, right? So your lighthouse might be the place, the stability that you're always going to, but then the landscapes of how we market, how customers are shopping, that changes.
Sure.
So you have to be pretty agile and flexible, don't you?
Yeah.
And say in 2 years from now, we might have to change this because our customers don't walk through the door anymore.
That's so true.
So how do you reshape your business that way?
Yeah. Well, the important thing is that your values never change. Your tactics, your behaviors do change. So for example, if we're a service-focused business, if we're a retailer that sees ourselves as a service business, for example, at some point the tide may shift and we may need to invest in a mobile platform, in technology tools for our customer. That doesn't necessarily change what our values are and what our service behaviors are with the customer, but we're just simply utilizing different tools. It changes our interactions a little bit, but our values, our commitment, our focus is still the same. It's just a different platform. And we could really say the same thing about social media, right? Leveraging Facebook, Twitter, manners, politeness, the way that we communicate really hasn't changed at all. It's just different tools. And so, again, it comes back to the values. And that lighthouse example I just love, because regardless of the weather, the lighthouse stays there, right? It's a constant. It's something that the ship captain can always look to for direction and orientation. And businesses need the same thing, because when they're unclear, employees are unhappy, they're confused, they feel foolish in front of customers because they don't know what kind of answer to give. And it's amazing once that's in place, and once you have a keen sense of your customer lifetime value and you organize your marketing efforts and retention efforts around that, the clarity makes everything in your business better, more profitable. Your employees are engaged on helping you grow your business around those values versus just showing up and doing their job. They really buy in when they see you aligned and you actually walking the walk, versus just having some corporate values on a sign, in the break room. It's amazing what happens.
Last question, Chris. I hear this all the time from mostly service companies, is we really don't have anything to say on social media, right? I mean, what are we going to tell people? We go in and fix their toilets? How do we engage on a platform where we know our customers are at, but we're not a very pretty business,
Yeah. Well, there's actually a really awesome example of this, and that is the Guinness Book of World Records. Okay, a lot of people don't know where the Guinness Book of World Records came from, and it was actually Guinness beer that, as beer companies started to proliferate, and they were just another beer, and it was no longer sexy anymore to have this awesome dark drought beer. The people at Guinness said, boy, what can we do to re-engage our customers? And they developed this trivia book, this Guinness Book of World Records, that of course now has become a household name, and I think a lot of us even forget that it's actually the beer company that started that. But that's one way that they offered value to their customers that are sitting in the bar that just as easily could have ordered a Hefeweizen or whatever the emergent beers were at that time. I mean, this was 80, 90 years ago or 100 years ago. But they answered that question really effectively. When I was an insurance agent, I had the same problem. Insurance is not sexy. It's not interesting. Nobody wants to talk about it unless they recently had a loss, and then it's overall kind of a negative conversation. And so what we did as a company was we looked for ways that we could do value-added things for our customers, whether they had anything to do with insurance or not. And so for us, that looked like community events, looked like regular barbecues where families could come and get dinner taken care of, after work. Had absolutely nothing to do with insurance, but it allowed us to build relationship because we were giving value. And other companies, plumbers, can do exactly the same thing, right? Looking for value that they can add in their domain. So even though it may have nothing to do with plumbing, it might have to do with home remodeling or winterizing your home. They could do a series of instructional videos on DIY, winterizing your pipes and things of that sort. It may not be sexy, but it can still add value to your customer.
Gotcha. Hey, well, Chris, thanks for coming out, being a guest for the second time. If people need to get a hold of you, chrisnordyke.com.
Yep,
and you'll have some blogs there and some helpful tips, and people can schedule a consult with you, I'm sure.
Yeah.
All right.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for being here. Want to wrap up today. Thank everybody for joining us. If you want to see all of our videos and Chris's other videos as well, go to mycityvideos.com. You'll see about 15 videos we've produced over the last few years, all about Corvallis. Until next time, make Corvallis a beautiful place. See you then.